guys so much for helping make VBS a success this year. From the crew leaders to the people who serve snack to all of you who donated. I know several of you were praying for this week. It does not happen without all of you, and the best part of this week is watching you guys be God to every single one of these kids that comes in our building. Thanks, guys.
Joy, celebrate that, yeah. Hey, to the small army of volunteers that it took to pull that off last week, thank you. There were some incredible kingdom seeds planted last week in this building. I can't wait to see what God does with them. Thank you for serving. Dads, can I just simply say Happy Father's Day? Dads, we're so grateful for you. Do me a favor, will you? If you're a dad in the room, would you simply stand up? We want to acknowledge you, and I want to give you something. Yeah, maybe. There are no ties coming from me to you this year. I want to give you something you'd actually use. So I've got a king-size Snickers bar for you, maybe. What I want to do is I want to see who the last man standing is, and then I want to play a little game. So fair warning, if you are the last man standing, I'm going to call you up on the platform, so play this little part of the game accordingly, all right? So I want to figure out who, not the oldest dad in the room, but who has been the dad the longest. Here's how we figure this out. If you're like me, and you're working on your message, and you're thinking about how you're going to get there, you start with, I was born in 1974, Micah was born in 2020, Eric was born in 2020. So let's see, I do the math. Oh, wait a minute. How old are they? That's how long I've been a dad. So start there. If you can't remember how old your oldest is, ask your spouse. She probably knows. Okay, let's do this. If you have been a dad 5 years or less, thank you for your service. Have a seat. And maybe keep your eyes peeled, because there's an opportunity here as you watch what happens over the game. There is an opportunity here for you to learn from and glean somebody else's wisdom. Things they did right, things they did wrong, we can learn from them, and I bet they would share with you if you ask. All right, 10 years or younger. If you've been a dad for 10 years or younger, go ahead and have a seat. We're grateful for you. Thank you. 15 years or younger. Go ahead and have a seat. You guys are awesome as well. 20 years or younger. Go ahead and have a seat. You guys are awesome. 25 years or younger. This is where yours truly would sit down. Thankful for you guys as well. 30. Oh, we've got a pocket over here of dudes still standing, some over here. 35, your oldest is 35 or older. This is awesome. Okay, opportunity for wisdom here. 40, you've been a dad for 40 years. Okay, 45. Try to decide when to go to the single digits. This last hour, oh my goodness, 66 years, I think. Dude had 50 kids, grandkids, great-grandkids. 50. Bob Wittig, if you see him, tell him Happy Father's Day. Where am I at? 50? 45? I lost track. I started talking and forgot. 50. If you've been a dad for 50 years or more, stay standing. Okay? Wow. 55? Okay. Oh, boy. Okay, we're down to 2. 56? I feel like an auctioneer. 57? Do you mind coming up and joining me up on the platform? While he does, give him a hand. Give him a hand. I want to play a little game. It's called Smile or No Smile. Father's Day is a day for dad jokes, as Tony and Glenn just modeled a bit ago. As my friend makes his way, here you go. The stairs are right here. Those are even better. Those are even better. Okay, come on over here. I've got a king size. You think you've earned the Snickers bar. You haven't quite yet. How this works is I'm going to tell a series of dad jokes. These are not funny. They shouldn't be. They're dad jokes. They're mildly humorous at best. They're loosely tied to the series. Come on, right over here in the middle. And I'm going to give it to you here in a minute. Introduce yourself to the crowd.
Jerry Tom.
Okay, Jerry. And you've been a dad for how many years?
58.
58 years. Celebrate that. Awesome. Has the Lord blessed you with grandkids yet?
Oh, yeah.
How many grandkids do you have?
Got 2, and my wife's got 1.
Incredible, incredible. All right, happy Father's Day. So the way Smile or No Smile works, this is loosely tied to our summer series. I'm going to tell a horrible dad joke, and if you can keep a straight face, no laughing, no smiling, you are in the candy bar. Are you up for the game?
Sure.
Here we go. Why do dogs make terrible dance partners? Because they have 2 left feet. Dogs have 4 paws. All right, he's got it. Strong dad game. What do dogs eat for breakfast? Poached eggs. What dog keeps the best time? A watchdog. What do a dog and a cell phone have in common? Both have caller ID. Thank you. I'm going to give you the Snickers bar anyway. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, show him a round of applause. I don't know if I got to tell my best 2. Here you go. How about this? What do you do if your dog chews up your dictionary? You take the words right out of his mouth. Which dog breed is guaranteed to laugh at all of your dad jokes? A Chihuahua. Happy Father's Day, dads. May all your dad jokes land today. Okay, let me see your hands. We're looking for dog people, cat people. How many of you are dog people? I'm doing this every week. Oh, this is fun. How many of you are cat people? Yeah, be proud. Awesome. Our summer series is called Cats and Dogs. We're asking the question, what is your relationship with your master? You have one. As you approach God, how do you approach him? Like a dog? Like a cat? It's a metaphor. We don't want to make too much of the metaphor. This is kind of just a fun way to sneak in some pretty hard-hitting theological truths. This one today is one of those. I'm going to invite you to embrace this opportunity to let the Holy Spirit do a little work in your heart. Because if you're like me, you have some cat-like tendencies. All week or all summer long, every week, we're reminding ourselves that you have a master. His name is King Jesus. His love language is obedience. We pull this straight from John 14:15. If you love me, you will obey my commandments. And today, we're talking about obedience for glory's sake. That's an odd choice of words. This is kind of a part 2 to last week's message. If you were here last week, we wrestled with this topic, cats pray selfish prayers. If you weren't here last week, go back and check that out. That's kind of the teaser for this week. I want to spend time this week. The title of the message is Cats Rob God of His Glory. God's glory. God's glory doesn't get enough airplay. I want to spend time exploring that topic today, and it reminds me of one of my cat-like tendencies. Cats are hoarders. You know this? They hoard stuff. We're moving. Oh my goodness, the next 2 weeks are going to be a flurry of activity at the Killebrew house as we're moving things from the house that we've raised our kids in 17 years. As you can imagine, some stuff has piled up. I moved the couch the other day, and I found the cat's stash. I should have taken a picture of it. I didn't. Found this one on the internet. This is not our cat. Looks like my son's cat. This is not my picture, but this is what I was looking at. All kinds of toys, hoarded, stuffed under the couch. That made me do a little bit more searching, and I found some other images. Meet Sadie. Sadie is a chapstick thief. She hoards chapstick. Shame on you, Sadie. Meet Fluffy. She steals the dog's toys and surrounds her food bowl with them. Cats are weird, right? They're just weird. Meet, I couldn't find its name, so I'm going to call it Evil Eyes. You'll agree with me, right? Evil Eyes hoards balled up receipts behind the bed. Their owner found them, and there's a picture. How about this one? Again, couldn't find the name, so I'm calling it, I look cute, but I'm stealing your Christmas eyes. Right? How about this one? Luna. This is the weirdest cat hoarder. Those are the rings from gallon milk jugs. Cats are weird. She steals these things and hoards them. The owner found them. And in the interest of fair play, while I was searching, I found this one. Somebody named their cat Stan. I have a moral problem with that. And the fact that this cat has stashed all of these things. Cats are hoarders. Hoarding is an awful affliction, and I've been remembering that over this past week. I was cleaning out my garage. 17 years of half-finished projects. I'm going to need that bolt someday, so I'll stick it over here. I found all kinds of treasures. We have a dumpster at our house, and I'm filling that sucker up. This was the weirdest item that I found, and I'll explain why. This is me. I climbed into the dumpster to take this picture. This is head gasket fix. I haven't had a car that was leaking from its head gasket since we lived in Bloomington, which means I moved that here from Bloomington 17 years ago. And it sat in my garage. To climb in and take that picture, I couldn't help but notice in the background, this is one of the bunk beds. When we lived in Bloomington 17 years ago, I built custom bunk beds for our little boys. And we moved them up here, carried them down to the basement, and I just moved them back up to the dumpster 17 years later, last week. Hoarding is an awful affliction. Hoarding stems from a lack of faith. Well, that's a bold statement. Think about it. I have fear. I have worry. I'm going to need that thing one of these days. Maybe worse, I have to pull myself up by my own bootstraps. If it is to be, it's up to me. I don't have faith that God will provide. I believe it depends on me. Hoarding, I stand by my statement, stems from a lack of faith. And the problem is, this robs God of his rightful glory. God is sovereign. He wants, he desires, he even demands glory. Cats and dogs, what are you chasing? You have a master. His name is King Jesus. His glory. That's what we're about. I want to talk to you just like any good dog is good at when you throw something, they retrieve it and bring it back to you. I want to retrieve 3 things this morning. We're chasing God's glory. Let's retrieve 3 items. And as we talk about them, do some of the heart work to work those things into your heart and ask yourself the tough questions. Am I acting more like a dog or a cat in this area of my lordship, my discipleship, as I chase hard after God? Here's the first one. God, spoiler alert, God has a plan. Each one of these feel like, of course, even trivial on the surface. But how often do we miss these? How often do we walk right past these? We don't chase these things down, retrieve them into our hearts. Cats and dogs. Dogs, they ask God, what is your plan? How can I help? Can I fetch that stick for you? Do you need your slippers? I'll bring them to you. Cats, on the other hand, I feel like our church's collective algorithm on social media maybe has shifted over the last few weeks. So many of you sent me this cartoon. I thought, and by the way, keep sending me stuff. I love that. I love the interaction. I thought maybe I need to share this one. This is how cats approach God. God on the throne, were you a good dog? Oh yes, I sat and I begged and I was loyal. And were you a good cat? You're sitting in my chair. It's humorous. But how often do you and I miss that? We have a master who is on the throne of your life. Do you allow him lordship? Do you yield lordship? You're the master. You have a plan. My job is to follow you. By the way, there's a verse in your Bible. I bet you've taken this out of context. I have a cat-like tendency here. I pull this one out of context in my life, maybe more often than I care to admit to you. Romans chapter 8, verse 28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. And cats would quickly in their brain follow that up with, and are called according to my purposes, what I want out of life, my comfort level, the things that I desire. Oh, he's going to bless me, right? There's like this weird exchange that goes on. I serve him a little bit, and he blesses me with more comfort, more beautiful sunshiny days on the golf course, a bigger boat. I don't know. What is your thing? How does that verse end? We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. God has a purpose. He has a plan. He's the master. Our job is to chase hard after him. This verse, I still would contend, is pulled out of context in the American church. Do you know the context that this verse ends this whole section of talking about? It talks about God's plan. Since the dawn of time, since creation, God has a plan, and it might not be your staid, stagnant religion, your comfortable life that you think it is. Let's go back and look at the few verses that precede this. Notice that the heading in my NIV study Bible heads this passage that ends with what we just read, present suffering, I don't like that word, and future glory. I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. God's glory. How is that revealed in us? I don't like the answer. You might not either. For the creation awaits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. Since the dawn of time, God spoke the world into existence. The world desperately needs to see Jesus in us and through us. Do we put him on display in our lives? How does this happen? For the creation was subjected to frustration. No kidding. Not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself would be liberated from its bondage to decay. Do you feel like the world is spinning out of control? And brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God, we know the truth. Are we putting Jesus on display? Is he Lord of our life? Is he the master? And we're chasing hard after him. And people see that in us. We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. You might say that the opportunities here, well, it's pregnant with opportunity. Do we seize the opportunity? Not only so, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, growing inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship, into God's family, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved, but hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have? But if we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait for it patiently. In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. And he who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God. At the end of all of that, groaning, suffering, hard times, this is that verse in context, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. What is his plan? It might be those hard times. God has a plan. What's my role? How do you approach those difficult moments in life? We're chasing God's glory. We're seeking to retrieve three things. The first one is that the truth that God has a plan. The second one is right behind it. He knows what he's doing. God knows what he's doing. Do we act like it? Dogs and cats, you see, approach this topic differently. A dog approaches God and says, well, he knows, therefore I'll trust. My faith is an opportunity to put God on display. He knows, I'll trust. A cat? Well, this is the dog's verse. Proverbs 3, verse 5, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. I trust God. He knows. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. A cat, though, that phrase, lean not on your own understanding, a cat says, I know. I'll perform. If it is to be, it's up to me. I can't trust him. I have to trust in me. I know. I'll perform. And when we do this, we miss out on the glory of God potential in our life. God wants to shine in you and through you. Let's talk about God's glory. I think we have a misconception of it sometimes. I have a $100 bill here. Don't get too excited. Dad's Father's Day, I'm not giving out a $100 bill today. The Snickers bar will have to suffice. By the way, I rarely find myself in possession of a $100 bill. I don't carry a whole lot of cash these days. But I told you we're moving, and so we're liquidating everything that must go, including all the junk in my basement. We've been listing some stuff on Facebook Marketplace. I have a $100 bill, which is legal tender. And $100 ain't what it used to be, but it's still $100, even if I wad it up. Even if I spit on it, disrespect it, I could throw it on the ground and stomp it. As I understand this, I don't want to put this to the test, but I think I could rip it up into a bunch of little pieces, and I could still carry it into the bank, and they'd tape it back together and probably trade it for an intact one. A $100 bill. No matter what we do to it, it retains its value. The same principle applies to God's glory. No matter what we do to God's glory, its value is always there. People might trample on it, maybe drag it through the mud. You could repeatedly use the Lord's name in vain, but no matter what you do, God's value, God's glory doesn't lose value. Through dire circumstances, we might not see his glory shining, but it's still there. God's glory never loses its value or its presence. And you can take that to the bank. I love this hymn, the doxology that's recorded for us in Romans chapter 11. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and the knowledge of God. His sovereignty, how unsearchable his judgments, his paths beyond tracing out. Who has known the mind of the Lord or has been his counselor? That's a rhetorical question, by the way. No one. He doesn't need advice from me or you or any of the rest of us cats. Who's ever given to God that God should repay them? That's also designed to be a rhetorical question, but in an American consumerism through that lens, how often do we trade our prayers for his blessings? I could preach a whole series on that. Don't have time for that today. For from him and through him and for him are all things. To him be the glory that is due him. Amen. By the way, all things means, you guessed it, all things. It's Father's Day. How do we show God's glory even in the mundane things? Dads, especially those of you who sat down first. It's fresh at 5 years. I was 26 years old when I first became a dad. I've got one word for you. Meconium. You know what that is? It's that sticky, tar-like substance, something about the amniotic fluid, and it's the first diaper. For me, it was like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. I don't know. It was the middle of the night. And I remember that moment, 26 years. Listen, I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I grew up serving in the nursery. I had changed some diapers before, but nobody prepared me for that moment. I didn't even know about it. Oh my goodness, what is this? I remember that moment and just being overwhelmed with the future. This little wriggly guy is depending on me. This is an opportunity for God's glory. God, you've made me a dad. Help me not miss the opportunity. Use me as you will. Even changing a diaper is an opportunity to put God's glory on display. What about looking up at the clouds? Yep. The creator God of the universe, am I drawn into thinking of him? Do I put his glory on display then? Driving down the road, seeing all the rest of the jokers that are stuck in traffic on 146th Street at 5 p.m. Some of them are flying the bird at me. Do I put God's glory in that moment on display? Well, am I a cat or am I a dog? How about watching your kids' ball game? Arguing with your spouse? That's an opportunity to put God's glory on display. If not, you might be doing it wrong. Smelling a rose, watching a sunset, you get the idea. Receiving a cancer diagnosis. Is that an opportunity to put God's glory on display? I would contend to you, yes. Yes, it is. We could either see it correctly and radiate it back to God by simply saying, God, you are amazing, or we can try to bear up under the circumstances, not recognizing his hand at work in our lives and not radiating his glory back to him. Not giving him the credit he deserves. Cats oftentimes rob God of his potential glory because they miss them. Why? By missing the truth that Jesus is Lord over Satan's bumper cars. This is summer puke at the theme park season, so I'll use this as a metaphor. I've got a picture from a Holiday World trip years ago. I hate these things. I'm 6'2". My knees always end up like way up here. And every time I get slammed in the side on one of those, my head jerks this way and I hurt for days afterwards. Sometimes life's circumstances seem like that. Life seems to run at us. And we bump into a circumstance that sends us careening in another direction, into other situations. Sometimes life seems out of the control of God's hand and will. Can I challenge you with this truth? It ain't. God often he takes what looks like the worst case scenario, and he has the ability to totally turn it around for his glory. Can I remind you of the way that Romans verse started? I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. I told you we're chasing after God's glory, and there's 3 things we're seeking to retrieve. God has a plan. He knows what he's doing. He wants our faith because it gives him glory. This is the opposite of hoarding. This is putting our faith on display to glorify God. It's an act of worship. God can always use difficult times for his glory, and these opportunities are happening all around us. I remember when I was first serving as a youth minister, some of those early days of youth ministry for me. Do you remember Columbine High School? That school shooting? I read the book, She Said Yes, The Unlikely Martyrdom of Cassie Bernal. Some of you maybe read that book like 25 years ago. A lot of life has happened between then and now, but I remember during that season, I had all these young people, students looking at me. It was a crisis of faith. Oh my goodness, in a school? We go to school. What do we do with this? Her very short life. From that moment, she encountered a gunman. She put God's glory on display, and I can tell you firsthand, I saw faith grow as a response to her story. Last week, we charted God's glory and our comfort. Just let me refresh your memory. Our comfort is what we desire. God's glory is what he desires. And we selfishly think, listen, I can get what I want while at the same time you get what you want. But God, he sends stuff our way. Why? To keep us humble? Maybe. For him to get more glory? Maybe. But also because he knows my heart, my cat-like tendencies. He knows that if we're chasing my comfort to the exclusion of his glory, this is really what it looks like in my life. I get more comfort, he gets less glory. I want to talk to you about difficult times. We're going to chart that and potential glory. But before I do that, can I simply read these two verses to you? Romans chapter 5, verse 3. Not so. We also see glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who's been given to us. And look at this in James. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Let me show you how we chart this. Difficult times. I try to avoid them. My cat-like tendencies. Potential glory for God, it's a bell curve, you might notice. If I have some hard times, well, there's a certain percentage of glory that God gets. I have maybe greater hard times, well, there's a greater opportunity for his glory to be put on display there. But check this out. When I have extremely hard times, this is why a cancer testimony is such a big deal. This is why forgiveness after a rape is such a big deal. This is why those stories of persecution during World War II are such a big deal to us. Extremely hard times produce a tremendous opportunity for God's glory to be put on display. When the rubber hits the road, I just talked about Columbine High School. My kids lived through a school shooting in Noblesville several years ago, and I remember my heart as we were racing toward that school with every other parent in Noblesville. Oh, God, I don't want the opportunity to put more glory on display. I'll tell you, the ministry I got to do that day, probably greater than the whole 2 or 3 months combined before that. There's something about hard times. God's glory gets to be put on display. Difficult times are pregnant with potential glory for God. Do we see the opportunity? Do we seize the opportunity? The tougher it gets, the more glory there is that could go to God. So what should our prayers look like then? Let's look at that chart again. Oh, God, is there an opportunity here for you to use me, even in this circumstance? Could I invite you to think about the week that you are currently facing right now? What potential glory for God are you pregnant with? What opportunity is there for God to put his glory on display in you and through you? Cats tend to respond to these with deep emotional hurt. When there's cancer, rape, early death. Listen, these are awful things. They would cry, foul, God, that's not fair. I'm not being blessed, so I don't see a reason to glorify God. When things aren't fair for cats, they begin to blame God for what happens, and as a result, cats get bitter toward God, resentful, even angry at him. Typically, cats never stop to consider that these are actually blessings in disguise or opportunities designed to allow them to point to God's glory in a greater way. Here's the way I'd sum that up. Cats, don't rob our jealous God of his glory. That line, God, that's not fair. We're going to deal with that topic in a few weeks. What does fairness have to do with it? Sometimes at the big things, there's opportunity to put God's glory on display. I read a story that came out of Sierra Leone like 25 years ago. Do you remember the Jesus film? It was an evangelistic tool. They would translate this film into the vernacular of the area, and a team of missionaries would take it in, show the film, use it as an evangelism tool to tell people about Jesus. Sierra Leone, Civil War. This is happening. Team of missionaries are showing the film. Guerrilla warfare, warriors break in, and a bunch of people get hurt. They capture 4 of these missionaries and basically put them into slavery, forced captivity. They steal their shoes from them because they don't want them to run away. Well, after walking around in the jungle for a period of time, one of them, there's infections in their feet, and one of them just said, I can't go any further. They shot him in the head on the spot. They're down to 3. They found the equipment. They played the film. Get this. Some of those people, their captors, got to know Jesus because of that. They told their commander, and he said, listen, I want you to show that film to everybody. They did. Here is God's glory on display. The slave film team members became chaplains to the rebels and discipled them in their newfound faith. The whole time, God had a plan. And they leaned into that. And they put his glory on display. Yeah, those are the big things. That's cool. But don't miss out on the small opportunities. This week, you might end up having a flat tire. You could acknowledge that, recognize that God knew that was going to happen. How are you going to respond? God, this is rotten timing. That's a cat. Or you could say as a dog, God, this is rotten timing as far as I'm concerned, but I know you're in control. I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to praise you for this. This is an opportunity. I'm not going to rob you of your glory. You could argue with fate. You could curse God. You could shout at how unfair it is. You could wish it never happened, robbing God of his potential glory. Or you could relinquish yourself to God's hands and seek his glory in spite of the evil that probably will take place around you. I've been inviting the worship team to come out and join me on the platform now. We're going to land the plane by spending some time with communion. Literally, communing with our Master. And I want to invite you to use this as an opportunity to do some introspection. Walk this into the week that you're facing. How are you going to handle the difficult times that you face this Tuesday? As you think about those things, let me point this out to you. Suburbanites, you and me, we approach rain differently than our farming brothers and sisters who live just a few miles from here. When it rains on my kids' ball game, or it rains on my golf game, or it rains on, we're moving the next couple of weeks. I don't want it to move or rain on that because I've got stuff to do, right? Well, I view it as a curse. The farmer right down the road, he views that same rain as a blessing. What determines the difference? Well, our outlook. How we view that determines how we judge that, and our attitude. So right now, as you think about the Lord's Supper, as you look at the body and the blood of Christ broken and shed for you, and you stare at the week that you're facing, could I encourage you to examine your heart, your outlook, and your attitude? And when you're ready, go ahead and receive that gift from God, his forgiveness. Take the communion elements, then we're going to respond with worship. I'll get us started. Would you bow your heads with me?